At our family celebration, my sister declared, "Mom and Dad decided, I'm taking your apartment." I smiled. "Interesting, I sold it yesterday." Her face dropped when I showed her the sales contract. I never thought family gatherings could feel like walking through a minefield, but that's exactly what every holiday became after Mom and Dad started playing favorites with my younger sister Jessica. I'm talking about the kind of favoritism that makes you question everything you thought you knew about unconditional love. My name's Michael, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a software engineer in Portland, Oregon, and up until 2 years ago, I thought I had a pretty normal family. Sure, Jessica was always the golden child. She could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She got away with things that would have gotten me grounded for a month when I was her age. But I figured that was just how families worked sometimes. The youngest always gets a little extra attention, right? I should have seen the signs earlier. Like when Jessica dropped out of college for the 3rd time and our parents just shrugged it off, saying she was finding herself. Or when she racked up $15,000 in credit card debt and Dad quietly paid it off without even telling Mom. Or when she moved back home at 27 and suddenly our parents were talking about how hard it was for young people to get started these days. But the apartment thing, that was different. That crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I bought my place when I was 28. It's a nice 2-bedroom condo in the Pearl District. Nothing fancy but clean and modern with big windows that let in tons of light. I saved for 3 years to put together the down payment, worked overtime every week, ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to remember. When I finally got the keys, I felt like I'd really made it, Like I was a real adult with something solid under my feet. The mortgage wasn't easy. Some months I had to choose between going out with friends or making an extra payment toward the principal. I chose the extra payment every time. I painted every room myself, fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, learned how to tile the bathroom from YouTube videos. That place wasn't just where I lived. It was proof that I could take care of myself, that I could build something with my own hands and my own sweat. Jessica, meanwhile, was still bouncing between jobs like a pinball. Barista at a coffee shop for 6 months, then she decided caffeine was giving her anxiety. Yoga instructor for a while until she got bored. She tried selling essential oils online, convinced she was going to become some kind of wellness entrepreneur. That lasted exactly 3 weeks. Our parents never said anything critical about Jessica's career path. They called it exploring her options and following her passion. When I pointed out that following your passion is a lot easier when someone else is paying your rent, Mom would get that tight-lipped look and change the subject. The first hint that something was brewing came during our family barbecue last 4th of July. We were all sitting on my parents' back deck, the smell of charcoal and lighter fluid heavy in the summer air. Dad was wearing his usual cookout uniform, cargo shorts and a polo shirt with a little mustard stain near the pocket. Mom had made her famous potato salad, the one with the tiny pieces of celery that crunch between your teeth. Jessica was scrolling through her phone, probably looking at apartments on Zillow like she did every few months when she got the urge to move out again. She held up her screen to show everyone a listing for some overpriced studio in Northwest Portland. "Look at this cute place," she said, her voice doing that sing-song thing it does when she wants something. "It's only $2,200 a month, and it has exposed brick." Dad almost choked on his beer. $2,200 for a studio? "The housing market is insane right now," I said, flipping a burger on the grill. "I'm so glad I bought my place when I did. Property values have gone up like crazy." That's when I noticed the look that passed between my parents. It was quick, barely a second, but I caught it. Mom's eyes darted to Dad, and he gave this tiny shake of his head, like they were having a conversation without words. Jessica caught it too. She always was good at reading the room when it came to getting what she wanted. "It's just so unfair," she said, putting on what I privately called her victim voice. "Some people get lucky with timing, and the rest of us are stuck paying ridiculous rent forever." Lucky? I laughed, not realizing I was walking into a trap. "Jess, I worked 60-hour weeks to save up for that down payment. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day for 2 years. There wasn't any luck involved." The temperature on the deck seemed to drop about 10 degrees. Mom's mouth got all pinched, the way it does when she thinks someone is being mean to Jessica. "Not everyone has the same opportunities, Michael," Mom said quietly. "Some people have different challenges to overcome." I wanted to ask what challenges Jessica had overcome exactly, besides deciding whether to get oat milk or almond milk in her $5 latte. But Dad was giving me a warning look over the grill, and I knew better than to start a fight during a family gathering. The conversation moved on to safer topics. The weather, some movie Jessica wanted to see, Dad's golf game. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something important, like there was a second conversation happening underneath the one I could hear. Over the next few months, things got weird. Not obviously weird, just subtle stuff that made my stomach feel tight whenever I thought about it too much. Mom would call to check on me, which was normal, but she'd ask strange questions about my finances. Was I happy with my mortgage payment? Did I ever think about downsizing? Had I looked into refinancing? Jessica started dropping by my apartment more often. She'd bring coffee or take out Thai food and want to hang out, which should have been nice. We'd never been super close growing up. The age gap and the whole golden child thing made it hard to relate to each other. But suddenly she was interested in my life, asking about work and whether I was dating anyone, and what my 5-year plan looked like. During one of these visits, I found her in my bedroom, looking through the papers on my desk. When I asked what she was doing, she got all flustered and said she was looking for a pen to write down a restaurant recommendation. "There's a whole cup of pens on the kitchen counter," I told her. She laughed it off. "Oh, duh, I'm so spacey sometimes." But something about the way she said it didn't sit right. Jessica might be flighty about career choices, but she's not stupid. She doesn't just wander into someone's bedroom looking for office supplies. I started paying more attention after that. Small things I might have ignored before began to form a pattern, like how Jessica would steer conversations toward my living situation whenever we were all together. She'd mention how quiet my building was, how great the location was, how much she loved the natural light in my living room. "You're so lucky to have found such a perfect place," she'd say. And there was something hungry in her eyes when she looked around my apartment. The weirdest part was how our parents reacted to these comments. Instead of telling Jessica to focus on her own housing situation, they'd nod along like she was making some profound observation. Dad would clear his throat and change the subject. Mom would get busy in the kitchen. I started to feel like I was going crazy. Like everyone was in on some joke that I didn't understand. The breaking point came in November. Jessica had been unemployed for 2 months after quitting her job at a boutique because the owner didn't appreciate her creative input, which translated to she kept rearranging the displays without permission and arguing with customers about their fashion choices. I was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, something we'd been doing since I was a kid. Mom makes this incredible pot roast with carrots and potatoes that fall apart when you look at them. And the whole house smells like comfort food and childhood memories. We were halfway through dessert, apple pie with vanilla ice cream, when Dad cleared his throat in that way that meant he had something important to say. "Michael, your mother and I have been talking," he began, setting down his fork. "We're concerned about Jessica's situation." "Here it comes," I thought. They want me to loan her money again. She's been struggling to find stable housing. Mom chimed in, her voice taking on that careful tone she used when she was about to ask for a big favor. And we were wondering if you'd consider letting her stay at your place for a while, just until she gets back on her feet. I looked at Jessica, who was suddenly very interested in pushing pie crumbs around her plate. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "How long is a while?" I asked. "Well," Dad said, "that's the thing. We were thinking it might be good for you to have some help with the mortgage. Split the costs, you know." Warning bells started going off in my head. "You want her to move in permanently?" "Not permanently," Mom said quickly. "Just indefinitely, until the housing market calms down." I felt like I was in some alternate reality where my family had been replaced by people who looked exactly like them but said completely different things. Since when did my parents think I needed help with my mortgage? I'd never missed a payment, never even been late. I had a good job, solid savings, excellent credit. "I don't need help with the mortgage," I said carefully. "I'm doing fine on my own." The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Jessica was still staring at her plate. Dad was rubbing his temples like he had a headache coming on. "Of course you are, sweetheart," Mom said. But her tone suggested she didn't entirely believe it. "It's just that sharing expenses would free up some money for other things. You could travel more or save for retirement or I could have my sister living in my space, using my utilities. Probably not paying rent on time because she's never held a job for longer than 8 months." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I was tired of dancing around the obvious. Jessica's head snapped up. "That's not fair, Michael. You don't know how hard it is out there for people our age. Some of us didn't get handed opportunities on a silver platter." Handed opportunities? I felt my face getting hot. I worked 2 jobs in college. I lived in a studio apartment with a broken heater for 4 years after graduation. I saved every penny I could and bought the cheapest place I could afford. What exactly was handed to me? "Boys?" Dad said in his warning voice. But Jessica was on a roll now. "You got help with your student loans. Mom and Dad co-signed for your car. You had their support while you were getting established. I paid back every cent of those student loans myself. And that car? I drove it for 8 years until the transmission finally died." "What support are you talking about?" Mom leaned forward, her eyes getting teary the way they always did when family discussions turned heated. "We just want what's best for both of our children. Is it wrong to want our kids to help each other?" And there it was. The guilt trip I'd been expecting. The implication that I was being selfish. That a good son would welcome his sister with open arms and not ask uncomfortable questions about rent or house rules or how long temporary was supposed to last. I looked around the table at my family, these people I'd loved and trusted my whole life, and realized they'd already made their decision. This wasn't a discussion or a request. This was them telling me what was going to happen and expecting me to go along with it, because that's what I'd always done. "I need to think about it," I said finally. Jessica's face lit up. "Really? Oh my God, Michael, thank you so much. I promise I'll be the best roommate ever. I'll cook and clean and—" "I said I need to think about it," I interrupted. "I haven't decided anything yet." The hope in her eyes dimmed a little, but she nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need." I drove home that night with my mind racing. My apartment felt different somehow. Smaller and more precious. Like something I needed to protect. I walked through each room, looking at my furniture, my books, my carefully chosen decorations. This was my space. my sanctuary, the first place that had ever been truly, completely mine. But even as I was thinking that, I could hear my mother's voice in my head. Is it wrong to want our kids to help each other? Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe this was what family was supposed to do. Make sacrifices for each other, share what they had, put the needs of the group ahead of individual wants. I spent the next week going back and forth on it. Some days I'd convince myself it could work. Jessica and I were adults now. Maybe we could find a way to coexist peacefully. She'd said she wanted to contribute, and having help with utilities would be nice. Plus, if she was living with me, maybe she'd finally get motivated to find a stable job. Other days, I'd remember the way she'd left the kitchen after making a sandwich during her last visit. Crumbs on the counter, mayo jar left open, bread bag twisted but not sealed. Or how she'd cranked up the music while I was on a work call and acted surprised when I asked her to turn it down. The deciding factor came when I talked to my friend Brad, who'd let his brother crash at his place temporarily 3 years earlier. "Dude," he said when I told him about the situation, "temporary never means temporary when it comes to family. My brother is still sleeping on my couch, still promising he's going to get his own place next month. I've had exactly one date in 3 years, because what woman wants to come home with a guy whose little brother is always there playing video games in his underwear?" That image stuck with me more than it should have. Not the underwear part specifically, but the idea of never being alone in my own home again. Of always having to consider someone else's schedule, someone else's needs, someone else's mess. I was still weighing the pros and cons when Jessica called me directly, bypassing our parents for the first time in weeks. "Hey, big brother," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I was wondering if you'd made a decision yet about the roommate situation." "Still thinking," I told her. "Well, I've been thinking too, and I had an idea that might make this work better for both of us." Here it comes, I thought. The catch I'd been waiting for. What if instead of me just moving in and splitting expenses, I actually bought half of your place from you? Like, we could be co-owners. That way you'd get a chunk of cash to do whatever you want with, and I'd have real ownership instead of just being a tenant. I almost dropped the phone. "You want to buy half my apartment?" Well, not me exactly. Mom and Dad would help with the down payment, obviously. But yeah, we'd split the mortgage going forward, and when the time comes to sell, we'd split the profits 50-50. It's perfect, right? "No," I wanted to say. "It's not perfect. It's insane." But what came out of my mouth was, "I'll think about it." After I hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at the city lights through my big windows. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of traffic from the street below. My space, my peace, my carefully constructed life. And Jessica wanted half of it. I called my parents the next morning to talk through this new proposal, assuming they'd be as surprised as I was. They weren't. "Oh, you talked to Jessica," Mom said before I could even explain why I was calling. "What did you think of her idea? You knew about this?" "Well, we discussed it, yes. It makes sense, doesn't it? This way, everyone gets what they want. Everyone except me, apparently. But I didn't say that. I'm not sure I'm ready to sell half my place," I said instead. There was a pause, and I heard muffled voices like someone had put their hand over the phone. When Mom came back on the line, her tone was different, more serious. "Michael, honey, we need to talk. Can you come over tonight after work?" That evening, I found myself back at my parents' kitchen table. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. No comfort food smells, no casual conversation. Dad had his reading glasses on and a manila folder in front of him. Mom was wringing her hands. Jessica was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Jess?" I asked. "She's out with friends," Dad said. "We wanted to talk to you privately." Oh, great. This was starting to feel like an intervention. Dad opened the folder and pulled out what looked like legal documents. "Son, your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking about the future, about our retirement, about what happens to our assets when we're gone, about how to make sure both of our children are taken care of." I didn't like where this was going. "We've been talking to a financial planner," Mom added, "and he helped us understand some things about estate planning and tax implications that we hadn't considered before." Dad slid a paper across the table. "The thing is, when we die, this house and our other assets are going to be split between you and Jessica equally. That's always been the plan." "Okay," I said slowly. "That makes sense. But the tax burden on inheritance can be significant," Dad continued, "especially with property values rising the way they have. The planner suggested it might be smarter to start transferring some assets now, while we're still alive, to minimize the tax hit later." I was starting to get a sick feeling in my stomach. "What does this have to do with my apartment?" Mom and Dad exchanged another one of those looks. "Well," Mom said carefully, "you've already gotten help from us over the years. The student loan co-signing, the car loan, the advice and support while you were getting established. In a way, we've already invested in your success. But Jessica hasn't had those same opportunities," Dad picked up. "She struggled more, needed different kinds of support. So we're thinking it might be fair to help her get started with homeownership now, to balance things out." The sick feeling was getting worse. "By buying half my apartment?" "By helping her buy half your apartment," Mom corrected. "You'd get a significant cash payment, and she'd get the chance to build equity instead of throwing money away on rent. It's a win-win." I stared at them, trying to process what they were really saying. "You want to use your money to buy my property for Jessica?" "Not for Jessica," Dad said. "With Jessica. She'd be a co-owner, not a beneficiary. She'd have real skin in the game." "And what if I don't want to sell?" Another pause. Another look between them. "Michael," Mom said gently, "we're not getting any younger. Your father's retirement fund took a hit during the pandemic, and with inflation the way it is, we're trying to be smart about our financial future. This arrangement would help all of us." I felt like I was being slowly crushed by a weight I couldn't see. They weren't asking me to help Jessica. They were asking me to give up half of everything I'd worked for so that they could feel better about their favoritism. They wanted to use my success to solve the problem of Jessica's lack of success, and they wanted me to be grateful for the opportunity. "I need time to think about this," I said, standing up from the table. "Of course," Dad said. "But don't take too long. The financial planner thinks we should move on this before the end of the year for tax purposes." I drove home in a daze. My apartment building looked different somehow, less like home and more like a commodity, something to be divided and redistributed according to my parents' sense of fairness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the hours I'd worked, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the times I'd chosen responsibility over fun because I wanted to build something stable. And now my family wanted me to hand half of it over to someone who had never made those choices, never demonstrated that kind of commitment. But every time I started to get angry, I'd hear Mom's voice asking if it was wrong to want our kids to help each other. I'd think about Jessica struggling to find affordable housing, about my parents worrying about their retirement, about being the kind of person who puts family first. The doubt was eating me alive. I decided to do something I'd never done before. I made an appointment with a lawyer, not because I was planning to fight my family, but because I needed to understand exactly what I'd be agreeing to if I said yes to this arrangement. The lawyer, a woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in real estate transactions, listened to my story with the kind of professional neutrality that was somehow comforting. She didn't tell me what I should do, just explained the legal implications of various scenarios. If you sell half your property to your sister, she said, you'd need to establish clear agreements about everything from mortgage payments to maintenance costs to what happens if one of you wants to sell your share later. These kinds of arrangements can work, but they require very detailed contracts and a lot of trust. What if the trust isn't there? I asked. She gave me a look that suggested she'd heard this story before. Then you could end up in a situation where you're legally tied to a property with someone who doesn't share your vision for how it should be managed. Worst case scenario, you could be forced to sell the entire property to resolve disputes. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about worst case scenarios. What if Jessica stopped making her half of the mortgage payments? What if she wanted to rent out her half to someone I didn't approve of? What if she decided to move out, but didn't want to sell her share back to me? What if this whole thing was just a way for my parents to give Jessica something valuable, without having to admit they were playing favorites? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this wasn't really about helping me or creating a fair arrangement. This was about solving the Jessica problem by making it my problem too. But I still wasn't ready to say no. These were my parents, people who'd raised me and supported me and loved me my whole life. If they thought this was the right thing to do, maybe I was wrong to resist it. I decided to test the waters. I called Jessica and told her I was seriously considering the co-ownership idea. But I wanted to talk through some of the practical details first. "Oh my God, really?" she squealed. "Michael, you're the best brother ever. This is going to be so amazing. We can redecorate the living room together, and I have so many ideas for the kitchen and—" "Hold on," I interrupted. "Before we get ahead of ourselves, I need to know you're serious about this. What's your plan for making the mortgage payments?" There was a pause. "Well, Mom and Dad are helping with the down payment, and I'm sure I'll find a good job soon. The market is getting better and—" "Jessica, the mortgage payment is $1,800 a month. Your half would be $900, plus utilities, HOA fees, property taxes. We're talking about probably $1,200 a month minimum. Do you have that?" Another pause. "I mean, not right now, but like I said, I'm looking for work. And in the worst case scenario, Mom and Dad said they could help out temporarily if needed." My heart sank. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a job. She didn't have savings. This whole arrangement was just another way for our parents to subsidize her lifestyle. Except now they wanted to use my property as collateral. "What kind of job are you looking for?" I pressed. "I'm keeping my options open. Maybe something in marketing or event planning, or I've been thinking about getting into real estate." I'd heard all of this before. Jessica was always thinking about getting into something new, usually whatever career path happened to be trending on social media that week. "Have you actually applied for any jobs?" "I'm being strategic about it," she said, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into her voice. "I don't want to just take any random job. I want to find something that's a good fit." "Right," I said. "And in the meantime, Mom and Dad would cover your half of the expenses." "Just temporarily." God, Michael, why are you being so negative about this? I thought you were on board. After I hung up, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. This wasn't a business arrangement or a family favor or a smart financial move. This was my parents buying Jessica half of my apartment and expecting me to be grateful for the privilege of sharing my home with someone who couldn't afford to live there. But I still couldn't bring myself to say no outright. Instead, I did what I always do when I'm avoiding a difficult conversation. I procrastinated. I told my parents I needed another few weeks to think it over. I told Jessica I was having the property appraised to make sure we got a fair valuation. I told myself I was being thorough and responsible. Really, I was hoping the problem would somehow solve itself. It didn't. Instead, the pressure started ramping up. Mom would call with updates about Jessica's housing search, always emphasizing how expensive everything was and how stressed Jessica was getting. Dad would mention the financial planner's advice about year-end deadlines. Jessica would text me links to furniture she wanted to buy for our place. The worst part was how everyone started talking about it, like a done deal. At Thanksgiving dinner, Mom mentioned that Jessica would probably be moved in by Christmas. When I corrected her, saying I hadn't actually agreed to anything yet, she looked confused. "But I thought you were just working out the details," she said. "I'm still deciding whether to do it at all." The silence around the turkey table was deafening. Jessica's face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Dad cleared his throat. "Son," he said carefully, "we've all been operating under the assumption that this was something you wanted to do. If you're having second thoughts, we need to know." I looked around at my family, all of them staring at me like I was being unreasonable, like I was the one who'd created this situation instead of just being the one expected to solve it. "I never said I wanted to do it," I said quietly. "I said I'd think about it." Jessica's eyes were getting teary. "Michael, I don't understand. I thought we were going to be roommates. I've been planning my whole life around this." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my apartment anymore. Jessica had built her entire future around the assumption that I'd give her what she wanted. She hadn't looked for other housing options, hadn't pursued job opportunities more aggressively, hadn't made any backup plans. She'd put all her eggs in the basket of my generosity. Our parents had let her do it, encouraged her even. "Maybe that was a mistake," I said, and immediately regretted how harsh it sounded. But Jessica didn't get angry. She got hurt, which was somehow worse. "I can't believe you'd be so cruel," she whispered. "This is my future we're talking about. My life." "It's my life too," I said. "It's my home." "But you have so much," she said, gesturing around my parents' house like it proved something. "You have a good job, and savings, and security. I have nothing. And you can't even share a little bit of what you have with your own sister?" There it was. The guilt I'd been avoiding for months, laid out in plain terms. I was the successful one, the responsible one, the one who had more than enough. Jessica was the struggling one, the vulnerable one, the one who needed help. And what kind of person refuses to help their sister? The kind of person I was, apparently. I left dinner early that night, claiming I had work to catch up on. I drove home through the November rain, my windshield wipers making that rhythmic sound that usually puts me to sleep, but now just sounded accusatory. Back and forth, like a metronome counting off all the reasons I was a selfish person. My apartment felt too big when I walked in. Too quiet, too much space for just one person. Maybe Jessica was right. Maybe I did have more than I needed. Maybe sharing was the right thing to do. But every time I started to convince myself of that, I'd think about the lawyer's warnings about worst-case scenarios, or Jessica's vague job plans, or the way our parents had made this decision without really consulting me. I was trapped between my guilt and my instincts, and I couldn't see a way out that didn't make me hate myself or resent my family. That's when I decided to do something that would either solve the problem or blow up my relationships with the people I loved most. I put my apartment on the market. Not to sell it to Jessica. To sell it to strangers, take the money, and start over somewhere else. If my family wanted to redistribute wealth, they could use their own assets. If Jessica needed housing help, they could buy her a place directly instead of using my property as the vehicle. I called a real estate agent on Monday morning and had the place listed by Wednesday. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just wanted to see what the market value was, what my options were, whether this was even feasible. The agent, an energetic woman named Carol who wore too much perfume and talked too fast, took one look at my place and started gushing about the location, the natural light, the recent renovations I'd done to the bathroom. "Honey, you're going to have multiple offers within a week," she predicted. "This market is crazy hot right now. You could probably get $200,000 more than you paid for it." $200,000. That was more than enough to buy something smaller in a different neighborhood, maybe even a different city. I could take a remote job, move somewhere with a lower cost of living, start fresh where nobody expected me to solve their problems with my real estate. The idea was intoxicating and terrifying. Carol was right about the market. I had 3 offers within 5 days, all of them over asking price. One couple even offered to waive the inspection and close in 2 weeks. I was sitting at my kitchen table, looking at the offers and trying to work up the courage to accept one, when Jessica showed up at my door. "Hey, stranger," she said, letting herself in like she lived there already. "I brought coffee. The good stuff from that place downtown you like." She handed me a cup and settled onto my couch like she owned it. So I was talking to Mom and Dad about timeline stuff, and we were thinking maybe I could move in before New Year's. That way we could start fresh in January, you know? New year, new living situation. I looked at her sitting in my space, planning her future in my home, and felt something snap inside me. "Jessica," I said, "I need to tell you something." She looked up from her phone, where she'd been scrolling through what looked like Pinterest boards for apartment decorating. I listed the apartment for sale. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire neither of us had seen coming. "What do you mean, you listed it?" "I mean, I called a real estate agent and put it on the market. I have 3 offers already." She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. But we were going to buy it together. Mom and Dad are already working with their financial guy on the down payment. I never agreed to that, Jess. I told everyone I needed to think about it. Her face was cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like panic. "You can't sell it. We have plans. I've been telling people I'm moving to the Pearl District. I picked out paint colors." "You picked out paint colors for my apartment without asking me?" "Our apartment," she corrected automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, the apartment we were going to share." "Michael, you can't do this. This was supposed to be my fresh start." I felt bad for her, I really did. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. The weight of everyone else's expectations was finally lifting off my shoulders. "You can still have a fresh start," I said gently. "Just not in my apartment." She pulled out her phone and started dialing. "I'm calling Mom." "Go ahead." She did, right there in my living room, putting the call on speaker like she wanted me to hear every word. "Mom, Michael sold the apartment. she said before Mom could even say hello. What? No, sweetie, that's not. Michael wouldn't do that without talking to us first. I'm sitting in his living room right now. He said he already has offers. There was a pause, then Mom's voice again, tight with what I recognized as barely controlled anger. Put him on the phone. Jessica handed me her phone like it was evidence in a criminal trial. Michael James Patterson, Mom said, using my full name like she did when I was in trouble as a kid. What is going on? I put my apartment up for sale, I said calmly. I got tired of feeling pressured to give it away. Give it away? Nobody asked you to give anything away. We offered to buy half of it from you at fair market value. With Jessica as the buyer, using your money for someone who can't afford the monthly payments. That's not a sale, Mom. That's a gift with extra steps. I heard Dad's voice in the background. Then Mom came back on the line. We're coming over. Don't make any decisions until we get there. The line went dead. Jessica was still sitting on my couch, but now she looked smaller somehow. Defeated. I can't believe you do this to me, she said quietly. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm making a decision about my own property. You know I can't afford to live anywhere else decent. You know how hard it's been for me to find something stable. Then maybe it's time to expand your job search beyond creative fields that don't pay rent money. As soon as I said it, I knew it was too harsh. But I was tired of walking on eggshells around Jessica's feelings while she walked all over mine. She started crying then. Not the dramatic kind of crying she did when she wanted attention, but the quiet, hopeless kind that made my chest hurt. I thought you loved me, she said. I do love you. But that doesn't mean I have to give up my home for you. It's not giving up. It's sharing. It's what families do. Before I could respond, I heard footsteps on the stairs outside my door. Mom and Dad had made record time getting over here. Mom came in without knocking, her face flushed like she'd been driving too fast. Dad followed behind her, looking tired and stressed. Okay, Mom said, looking around my apartment like she was cataloging everything that was about to disappear. Let's all sit down and talk about this like adults. We arranged ourselves in my living room. Mom and Dad on the couch with Jessica, me in the armchair across from them. It felt like a negotiation, or maybe a tribunal. Michael, Dad started. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. When we talked about the co-ownership arrangement, we thought you were excited about the opportunity. You seemed interested in the financial benefits. I was interested in understanding what you were proposing. That doesn't mean I was committed to doing it. But you let us move forward with the planning, Mom said. The financial advisor, the down payment arrangements, Jessica getting her hopes up. If you were having doubts, you should have said something earlier. I did say something. I said I needed time to think about it. Multiple times. Jessica looked up from her tissues. But you never said no. You let me believe this was going to happen. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. The room went quiet, except for the sound of Jessica sniffling and the hum of my refrigerator. Outside, it was starting to get dark, the way it does in winter when afternoon slides into evening without warning. Dad cleared his throat. Son, what would it take to make this work? What are your concerns that we need to address? This was the question I'd been dreading, because answering it honestly would mean admitting things I didn't want to say out loud. My concern is that this isn't about helping me or creating a fair arrangement, I said finally. This is about you guys using my asset to solve Jessica's problems because you feel guilty about the way you've enabled her for years. Mom's face went white. That's not fair. isn't it? When's the last time Jessica held a job for more than a year? When's the last time she paid her own rent without help? When's the last time you guys asked her to figure something out on her own instead of rescuing her? That's cruel, Jessica whispered. It's true. Dad leaned forward in his chair. Michael, everyone has different strengths and challenges. Jessica is creative, artistic. The traditional job market doesn't always reward those qualities. The traditional job market rewards showing up and doing the work you're paid to do. Everything else is secondary. You don't understand what it's like, Jessica said, her voice getting stronger. You've always been good at school, good at interviews, good at playing the game. Some of us have to work harder to find our place. Working harder doesn't mean working less, Jess. It doesn't mean quitting when things get difficult or expecting other people to subsidize your lifestyle while you find yourself. I was being mean now, saying things I'd thought but never voiced. But I was also tired of pretending that Jessica's problems were just bad luck or a tough economy or anything other than a pattern of choices she'd made over and over again. Mom was crying now, too. I can't believe my son would be so heartless toward his own sister. I'm not being heartless. I'm refusing to be responsible for fixing problems I didn't create. So what? You're just going to sell your place and leave Jessica homeless? Jessica is not going to be homeless. She's going to be an adult who has to figure out her own housing situation instead of expecting me to provide it for her. Dad stood up abruptly. I think we need to take a step back here. Everyone's getting emotional and we're not solving anything by arguing. But Mom wasn't ready to step back. Michael, if you sell this apartment, you're telling your sister that your comfort is more important than her security. Is that really the message you want to send? And there it was. The guilt bomb I'd been waiting for. The implication that saying no to this arrangement made me a bad person, a selfish brother, someone who prioritized money over family. The message I'm sending, I said carefully, is that I get to make decisions about my own life and my own property, and that Jessica needs to take responsibility for her own life and her own choices. Jessica stood up, her face streaked with tears, but her jaw set in a way I recognized from childhood arguments. Fine, she said. If that's how you really feel, then I guess I know where I stand with my big brother. I guess I know who I can count on when things get tough. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Come on, Mom and Dad. Let's let Michael enjoy his precious apartment all by himself. Mom and Dad followed her, but Dad paused at the door. I'm disappointed in you, son, he said quietly. This isn't how we raised you. After they left, my apartment felt different again. Not too big this time, but too small. Like the walls were closing in on me, trapping me with the echo of everything I'd just said and everything they'd said back. I sat in my living room for a long time that night, looking at the real estate offers on my coffee table and wondering if I'd just ruined my relationship with my family over a piece of property. But every time I started to second-guess myself, I'd remember the way Jessica had been planning paint colors for my walls, or the way my parents had assumed I'd go along with their arrangement, or the way none of them had ever asked what I actually wanted. I called Carol the next morning and accepted the highest offer. The closing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, right before Christmas. I didn't tell my family about the timeline, partly because I was still hoping we could work things out somehow, and partly because I was afraid of what they'd say if they knew how fast this was all happening. I spent those 3 weeks looking for a new place and trying to figure out how to repair the damage I'd done to my relationships. I called Jessica twice, but she didn't answer. I left voicemails saying I wanted to talk, that maybe we could find a different solution. but she never called back. Mom and Dad were barely speaking to me. When I called to check in, the conversations were stilted and cold. They answered my questions with one-word responses and never asked how I was doing or what my plans were. I found a smaller place in southeast Portland, a one-bedroom house with a tiny yard and character that the real estate listing described as cozy, but which really meant cramped. It was fine, though. Good enough for a fresh start. The day of the closing, I was signing papers and transferring keys and trying not to think about the fact that I was giving up the first place I'd ever really loved. Carol was chattering about market trends and investment opportunities. But I wasn't really listening. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Heard you're closing today. Hope you're happy." I wasn't happy exactly, but I wasn't miserable either. I felt like I'd taken control of my own life for the first time in months. I moved into the new place on a rainy Saturday in December, with help from a couple of friends who didn't ask too many questions about why I was selling a nice condo to rent a house half the size. I unpacked my books and hung my pictures and tried to make the space feel like home. It didn't, not yet. But it felt like mine. I was planning to spend Christmas alone, maybe order Chinese food and watch movies. My parents had invited me to the usual family gathering, but the invitation felt obligatory rather than warm. Jessica would be there, probably still angry. There would be tension and awkward conversations and careful politeness that fooled nobody. I was trying to decide between A Christmas Story and Die Hard for my holiday movie marathon when someone knocked on my door. It was Jessica. She was standing on my small front porch in the rain, holding a bottle of wine and looking nervous. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Can I come in? I brought a peace offering." She held up the wine. I let her in, taking her coat and offering her a towel for her hair. She looked around my new place with curious eyes, taking in the smaller rooms and different layout. "It's nice," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "Very you." We sat in my new living room with glasses of wine, not talking for a while. Outside, the rain was getting heavier, drumming against the windows like it was trying to get our attention. "I owe you an apology," Jessica said finally. "I've been thinking about what you said, about taking responsibility for my own choices. And you were right about some things." I waited, not sure where this was going. "I have been coasting," she continued. "I have been expecting other people to solve my problems. And maybe I did assume that because we're family, you just automatically want to help me, even if it wasn't what was best for you." "Jess, let me finish," she said. "I also think you could have been nicer about how you said it. Some of the things you said really hurt." She was right about that, too. "I'm sorry," I said. "I was feeling cornered and I lashed out. That wasn't fair to you." "Apology accepted. And I'm sorry for assuming your apartment was going to be my solution. I should have asked instead of just planning my whole future around your generosity." We sat there sipping wine and listening to the rain. And for the first time in months, being around my sister felt comfortable instead of stressful. "So what's your plan now?" I asked. She smiled, and it was different from her usual smile. Less performative, more genuine. "I got a job," she said. "A real job with benefits and everything. I start in January." "Doing what?" "Customer service for a tech company. Not glamorous, but it's steady and it pays decent money. And I found a studio apartment in Selwood that I can actually afford on my salary." I felt a surge of pride and relief. "That's great, Jess. I'm really happy for you." "It's weird, actually. Once I stopped waiting for the perfect opportunity and just started applying for regular jobs, things moved pretty fast. Turns out employers like it when you show up for interviews and don't ask about work-life balance in the first 10 minutes. We both laughed at that. "What about Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Are they okay with your new plan?" Jessica's expression got more complicated. "They're adjusting. I think they thought they were helping me by enabling me, but it was actually making things harder. I needed to prove to myself that I could handle my own life. And now you have." "Now I'm trying to. It's scary, being completely responsible for yourself. But it's also kind of exciting." We finished the bottle of wine and ordered pizza, talking about her new job and my new house, and carefully avoiding the topic of our parents. It felt like we were rebuilding something that had been broken, maybe for years. When she was getting ready to leave, Jessica hugged me at the door. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not giving me what I wanted. For making me figure out what I actually needed instead." After she left, I sat in my small living room feeling lighter than I had in months. Maybe selling my apartment had been the right decision after all. Not because of the money or the fresh start, but because it had forced all of us to be honest about what we really wanted from each other. I never did have that Christmas movie marathon. Instead, I called my parents and asked if the dinner invitation was still open. It was awkward at first, but we got through it. Jessica told everyone about her new job, and I talked about my plans for fixing up the house. Nobody mentioned the apartment. It took months for things to get back to normal between us, but they did eventually. My parents learned to see Jessica as an adult who could solve her own problems, and Jessica learned that she was actually pretty good at solving them. I learned that saying no to family doesn't make you a bad person. Sometimes it makes you a better brother. I still live in that little house in Southeast Portland. I've painted the walls, planted a garden, made it completely mine. Jessica lives in her studio apartment and loves her independence. She's been promoted twice at work and is saving up for a bigger place. Our family gatherings are different now. Less tension, more genuine conversation. We all learned something valuable from that whole mess. That real love sometimes means letting people figure things out for themselves, even when it's hard to watch. Especially when it's hard to watch